And some people said, you're starting to sound like a deconstructionist. And they meant it as an insult, but I took it as a compliment.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, you know, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. Hello, David.
Hi, Mariah. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Called to Be Bad.
Yeah. I love the name of your show.
Thank you. I do too. I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but yeah. Yeah, so this is David Hayward. He was ordained to the ministry in 1987, and he left in 2010. He's been running the NakedPastor blog, speaking of excellent names. Since he's been running the NakedPastor blog since 2005, where he posts his provocative cartoons and articles. He launched an online community called The Lasting Supper, a place for people to change without being judged or instructed, and where they can learn to become spiritually independent. He's been cartooning, making art, writing, speaking, coaching around his core passions, which are personal, authentic freedom, the power to change our own lives, and the creative spirit to make our world a better place. He and his wife live in Eastern Canada and have 3 adult children. So it's great having you here, David, and we have an art piece in the works, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be released by the time people hear it yet, but I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I'm working hard on it, so you should get it within a couple of weeks anyway, or a few weeks.
Oh, perfect. And today we are going to talk about deconstruction and maybe reconstruction. We will see. Deconstruction has kind of become the new, buzzword, I guess, within faith communities. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit. But before we do that, I'm curious what you are drinking today.
I am drinking H2O, water, just good old water. Yeah, this is a 1 liter container, so I drink 2 of these a day. So it keeps me busy. That's on top of my coffee and if I have wine later or whatever, but yeah, so that's my drink of the day, water. How about you?
Awesome. I have coffee, and I'm happy because it's still hot. Sometimes it's cold by the time we end up filming. And I picked this mug specially for those of you listening. It is blue and green, kind of watercolory. And it says 2005 Glenwood Mennonite Church, 1955. So I think the church was founded in 1955 and the mugs were made in 2005 is what I think this was trying to say. And the reason I picked my Glenwood Mennonite mug is that's the church that I grew up in. And that's the church where my dad was pastor for 22 years.
Wow.
So this is kind of the place that laid the foundation of beliefs that I have, added upon and then moved towards deconstruction and also maybe reconstruction. I don't know. But anyways, I thought it was a fitting mug to have because I have a complicated relationship with this church. So.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But that's not what we're talking about. I mean, we could talk about it, but we're more talking about your experience of deconstruction and reconstruction. And usually on the show, just to establish a sense of shared language, we start with definitions. So I'm curious how you, David, define deconstruction and then also reconstruction. It doesn't have to be the perfect definition, but just like how you use that term.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I think I was the first one to use the word deconstruction to describe the questioning of our beliefs and everything, questioning everything.
Really?
Now,
hello, beloved baddies. A quick break to tell you that this episode is sponsored by the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, a nonprofit that supports and amplifies the voices of edgewalkers through art that catalyzes change, laughter that brings us together, and soul awakening to the creative spark within us. The support from the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul has meant the world to this podcast. So I highly encourage you to check out their website, arthumorandsoul.com, to see their other featured artists and projects. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon or get in touch. Now I'll let you get back to this episode of Called to Be Bad.
So I'll tell you a little story. Back in 2006, I think it was, I was a vineyard pastor at the time, and I was asked to attend a workshop on hermeneutics. And the theologian who was visiting had us read a whole bunch of textbooks on different hermeneutics. And one of the hermeneutics is deconstruction, that was founded by Derrida, Jacques Derrida in France. And so the deconstruction school of thought is actually a philosophy, and which is like a hermeneutic, a way of reading texts. And essentially, you question everything, and that you can't know what the truth behind the text is. That you can't know the author's intention. You can't know how things were transmitted. You're reading it through your own paradigms and interpreting it through your own definitions, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as I was reading this, the intent of that workshop was to talk me into not trusting the deconstruction school of thought and method of, so the whole point was this anxiety that the Bible is truth, and it's objectively true. No matter how we interpret it, it's still there, it's still true. But the deconstruction school of thought was like, no, you can't know what's true. The text can't be objectively true. There's no such thing. And so actually, they were trying to talk me out of that, but it actually converted me. Like I thought, wow, this really does kind of describe what I'm going through, because I was questioning everything. And it really was I thought, an excellent word for describing what was happening in my faith journey or beliefs. And that was, everything was being torn down, deconstructed, right? Instead of being constructed, it was being deconstructed, dissembled. And so I actually started using the word to describe what I was experiencing. And some people said, you're starting to sound like a deconstructionist. And they meant it as an insult, but I took it as a compliment. and then it just, I don't know, I just started using the word fairly often in my blog. 2008, I really was outspoken about it. Then in 2010, 2011, 2012, I formed a community called The Lasting Supper, an online community for people who are questioning their beliefs. And I really based it on, if you're deconstructing, this online community is for you. So, now in 2022, I mean, everybody's talking about deconstruction, some positively and some negatively, and some, wondering what the heck is going on. And so that's basically my definition of deconstruction, is just you questioning everything. It could be something as simple as, I don't believe that world could have been created in 6 days. Like maybe that's symbolic. Maybe that's a mythology or whatever, all the way to, is there a God? So anything across the whole spectrum of questioning your beliefs. For me, that is deconstruction. I also say there's only one way to deconstruct, and that's your way. So however you approach this whole thing, questioning your beliefs, questioning your faith, doubting, all that kind of thing, you do it your way. And that's your style of deconstructing. So does that help?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's crazy that you potentially use that word for the first time in this sort of faith context. Because from my perspective, that just seems, I don't know, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's I'm not willing to fight for it. I don't feel any pride about it or anything like that. It's just, it was just a convenient word that described what I was experiencing. And other people latched onto it. Now, though, some people are talking about the deconstruction movement. They're talking about the deconstruct, the demons of deconstruction. They're talking about, deconstruction being the enemy of the church and it's pulling people away, and it's being used in all different kinds of ways, when basically it just means questioning and doubting, and not trusting or taking for granted everything we're taught, and that we need to have open and inquisitive and curious minds if we really want to know what the truth is, rather than just swallowing what we're taught hook, line, and sinker. We become independent and decide for ourselves and look for ourselves what's true. Yeah.
Sure. And sometimes people talk about deconstruction like as a process, and then they throw in the word reconstruction. So what do you think of reconstruction? What is that? Does it have a place in this kind of disassembly of your faith or beliefs?
So I am quite adamant about not reconstructing. So deconstructing for me, I think it should be a way of life where you question everything, because society, our culture, religion, just the air around us, the media, everything is pushing their agenda on us. And we are constantly being fed information. I think our lifestyle should be one of suspicion and constantly questioning everything that we're expected to believe. And so I don't think that ever ends. Now, though I know some people talk about reconstruction because there's some anxiety there. Well, you have to believe something. What's the bedrock of your faith? And right. So that leads to an anxiety, but you have to believe something, and where I'm more of an open concept kind of a person, where when you tear everything down, it's wide open space. Enjoy it. Because actually getting comfortable and finding your poise in that giant mystery of unknowing is where your peace of mind will be, because you're never going to find the answer. That's why I don't recommend reconstruction, because often people, when they deconstruct, they'll jump into something else. They'll jump into, well, this is now what I believe. Now I'm a universalist, or now I'm an atheist, or now I'm a yoga instructor, or now I'm a Buddhist, or now I'm a, whatever. I don't care. Like I said, you do you. You do your own style. But I just recommend, once all the stuff that has been trying to contain you is torn down. Enjoy the room, enjoy the space. And, that doesn't mean you don't believe in anything. It just means that you no longer are bound by thought, and that you are open to all the wonder of the mystery. It's like this house that I'm in now.
Mm.
When I first bought this house, 19 years ago, it was a cottage. It's on the river, and it's all tiny rooms, like an old-fashioned cottage. Little living room, little kitchen, little dining room, little bedrooms. And I thought this place would be great with no walls. And so I opened it up. I took all the walls down, except for the bedrooms, of course, and the bathroom. But it's all open concept now. Yeah. And it's wonderful. The space is wonderful. And you look out over the large window over the river, and it's spacious. Why do I want to put walls back up? Just so I can feel safe again, or secure again? I know deconstruction's scary, and we want to feel something solid under our feet. But once if you just hold on for a little while, you'll learn that you can actually float, and that you don't have to worry about drowning in nothingness. You can actually float in this wonderful thing I call mystery with a capital M.
Yeah. There's some metaphor there that you were kind of touching on about like Jesus inviting us to walk on water, come out of the boat, or like I was picturing like, people want like this solid, firm foundation, and yet we're invited to walk on the water, and it's like constantly moving, the waves, and yet people, like when they're on the boat, like they might get seasick at first, but after a while they get their sea legs and they get used to it, and then you're, you have the ocean in front of you. I don't know if that metaphor is making sense, but that's where my mind was going. And so we have a house metaphor and an ocean metaphor. So choose your metaphor.
Yeah. It depends where you are on the spectrum of deconstruction or your beliefs. And, I've been all the way on the church-going, ordained pastor, evangelical believer end, all the way to, where some people might think I'm an atheist, or at least an agnostic, or whatever, right? Or a universalist, or whatever. Now, I know when you're early in deconstruction, there can be a lot of fear there. It's because it's very kind of traumatic experience when, some of the beliefs that you really did believe for so long start to shake a little bit. And I know how unsettling it is. It is very scary. But like I said, if you just hold on, that fear of this new way of being will pass. It's like decompressing into a new chamber, or like when you're climbing a mountain, you have to stop every 1,000 feet and acclimatize, and let your body decompress or compress or whatever, so that you can keep ascending. And deconstruction is kind of like that. Like we move along, and then we find a place where we're comfortable, and we stop, and we just stay there for a while, and then we find the courage and the resources to move ahead, then we will. And so I have a lot of empathy for people who are deconstructing. Take your time, do it your way. And I really don't care where you end up, whether you end up an atheist or even a better believer. To me, the fact that you made this decision is the important thing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. And for a while, I just like speaking personally, like I've never been bothered by the idea of asking questions, and kind of questioning
Mhm.
beliefs. And so I was kind of like, deconstruction, like I'm in it, but it's not making me feel like I've heard people talk about it as like almost a grieving process. And that hasn't ever really been my experience. But then recently I was at like it was like a faith weekend thing. And I don't know if I told you, but I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for 4 years.
Oh, no.
But yeah. So it's different being like supposedly like this like faith leader, and I was in this group, and I felt so out of step with where everyone else was. And it was a very lonely feeling. And I was kind of like, oh, this is it. This is the itch, the discomfort of deconstruction that so many people have talked about. Yeah, it was a weird moment. And I hadn't had that. I mean, also because of COVID, I haven't gone to like these kind of faith weekend retreat things.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
Can I address that?
Of course.
So when you're early on in your deconstruction and so on, there's this part of you that's pulling away from the you that you were and the beliefs that you had and so on. And we always end up gravitating towards and attracting people who are kind of like us. And so our communities kind of reflect who we are. But when we start deconstructing and we start pulling away you start pulling away from the you that you were, you also inadvertently are pulling away from the people who love the you that you were. And you think you're nervous about the new you. They're nervous about the new you too.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of weird, funky thing happens where you're changing, and you're requiring the people around you to accept that. You're not explicitly demanding it, but if they want to stay in relationship with you, they have to stretch with you. And that's just like in a marriage or any kind of a friendship. If you change, it requires the other person to stretch and to change as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what I think can happen with deconstruction if you keep pushing through. I've never had a baby, but I've watched 3 babies being born, and it's messy, and it's scary, and it's painful, and all that. And there's 9 months or more or less of agony for some women, and for the husbands, and so on and so forth. But it's kind of like that. You're birthing something new, and it can be really, really scary and messy and painful. But if you hold on, something beautiful will come forth.
There's another metaphor for us. We've got the house, we've got the ocean, we've got birth now. So
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I'm curious about your own personal experience with deconstruction. I mean, you talked a little bit about kind of taking this way of life, almost like a philosophy, and applying it to faith. But you used to be a pastor, and then you left. And what was that like? As someone who is currently a pastor, what's it like to leave the ministry, and did deconstruction play a role in you leaving? So what has your personal experience been like?
Okay, so I didn't know you were a pastor, Mariah, and I think that's really cool that you are.
Does that change everything?
I admire pastors, and I empathize with pastors, and I really empathize with pastors who are deconstructing, because here you are, like you said, you're getting up every week and teaching and so on, when you know, you're kind of having to balance yourself on you know, Osu ball while you're preaching, you know, the Osu balls, the exercise balls.
Is that,
Um,
yeah.
You're trying to balance yourself and your own faith while you're trying to help other people balance. It's really hard to do. So not like you. You grew up Mennonite. I grew up everything. Like we went to whatever church was closest. We moved all the time. So we went to whatever church was convenient. I call myself my own ecumenical movement because I've been to so many different churches, and I have no loyalty to any of them, right? Because I wasn't them long enough. Now I did get ordained Presbyterian Church in Canada, and but I served the church as a Presbyterian pastor and then as a vineyard pastor and so on. And anyway, I found myself gravitating towards churches that appreciated my approach, that I wasn't preaching from the top down, that we were going to be walking together. I wasn't going to be like leading them or, being their guru or anything like that. We were going to walk together, and all the churches I pastored were very much like that. And especially the last church I pastored, which was for like 15 years. It was a wonderful community where we just traveled together, and I didn't instruct. We kind of had conversations, and I taught with a very open hand and so on and so forth. Now, all the while I was deconstructing. I started deconstructing when I graduated from seminary. It was like 30 more years ago. But I had congregations and communities that accepted that, and we sort of traveled together and questioned things together and doubted together and explored together. So I was lucky that way, that I had supportive communities. Now, the last church I pastored, which was an awesome church, a great community and so on, it got to the point where they were starting to hear things from other churches and other pastors, and head office was getting letters of concern from other pastors and all this kind of thing, that I'd left the faith and that God had lifted his hand from me and I lost my anointing and all this kind of stuff. And I knew in 2009, when I had this experience, I knew my time was up. And about a year later, me and the congregation decided that it was time for me to move on and time for them to move forward. And so we had an amicable divorce, let's say. And so that's how I did it. It was, I, for the most part, had the support of the congregations, and it was wonderful, especially the last one. I was there for like 15 years, and it was wonderful. But it got to the point where I could not continue without making a lot of people uncomfortable.
Right.
You're thinking.
Yeah. No, I am. Yeah. Thank you for telling that story. I like your distinction of being a pastor that is not necessarily like the leader or kind of the guru as you said it, but a partner. I think I have really grabbed on to the idea of pastoring as accompaniment, as walking with, walking alongside, rather than, and I like that because it helps create better boundaries, because I can't carry their back. Okay, we're just like full of metaphors. I can't carry my congregants' backpack. They have to carry it themselves, and I have my own backpack. But we can walk alongside with our baggage, if you will, and explore together. I think that the idea, so like the church I have, Big C Church, I struggle with, but how beautiful could it be if individual congregations or communities could do this deconstruction work together. If we could come together and it would feel safe to ask these kind of sometimes scary, uncertain questions. I think I've been blessed with communities that have allowed me to kind of ask those questions. And the Bible is full of those kind of questions, like, I mean, but maybe that's a different direction, but yeah, I appreciate your perspective on ministry. So what would you say? I mean, this likely has happened based on what you have shared so far. But I ask every guest that comes on, what would you say if someone said that you were a bad Christian, or whatever identity you want to throw in there? Maybe the whole point is you don't have a word to fit in there. Okay, what if maybe bad person? What would you say if someone said you were a bad person because of your art or your perspectives on deconstruction or reconstruction?
Yeah, you don't have to say what if, because I get it every day where people say I'm a bad person, or I'm a heretic, or I denied the faith, or I hate God, or, I get all that all the time. I remember when I was a young pastor, being afraid of, I was starting, I started on this journey towards my own spiritual progress, my own spiritual growth. And I was a very young pastor at the time. And I had a spiritual director. And I had to sneak away to see her because she was a Roman Catholic nun in a monastery. And if anybody knew that, I would have been fired. But I expressed to her my fear of being called a heretic. That was a long time ago. And now I get called that every day, and it's okay. A heretic is just somebody who doesn't believe the popular opinion. That's what a heretic is. Somebody who goes against popular opinion. Yeah, that's me. For sure. That's me. And so I kind of wear that proudly. Jesus in the Gospels was called a heretic. Paul was called a heretic. Stephen was stoned as a heretic, et cetera, et cetera. The people we admire the most in the past, who we call our heroes, were all went against the flow, or they would still be alive. Well, they wouldn't still be alive, but they wouldn't have been executed or whatever. And so it just comes with the territory where you're dared to be anybody who dares to be their authentic self, they're going to get criticized. You're guaranteed. It just comes with the territory. Yeah.
Sure. So say someone is listening or watching and they are kind of either just starting out on this process of saying, hey, it's okay to question everything that I have been taught and everything that I hold dear. Or, they're kind of in the middle and still figuring this out. What advice would you give someone going through this deconstruction process? Other than deconstruction is a lifelong journey. Yeah.
So like I said, there's only one way to deconstruct, and that's your way. And part of the whole deconstruction process is you becoming spiritually independent. That means that you're no longer going to just go with the flow. So you're going to stand apart. You're going to start standing apart. You're going to start being different. You're going to start changing. People are going to notice. And you can choose the speed at which that happens. So that's why I recommend you just do it your way. And it's almost like, okay, you've been in the passenger seat. You've been watching other people drive. Then you were allowed to take the steering wheel for a little bit, or it's like those training cars where you have your own steering wheel, but the other guy has the real steering wheel. And then now you're on your own. You're on your own.
Mm.
You got to learn how to drive your life. And it's not just a religious thing, it's an adult thing where you need to come to that place in your adult life where you are now self-determining, you're autonomous, you're the captain of your ship, the master of your destiny. That includes spiritually. And, that doesn't mean that you no longer need pastors or, instructors or spiritual directors or coaches or anything, but you get to choose how you use them in your life or how you allow them in your life. This is it's you now. It's all up to you. And I promise you, once you get used to being the driver of your own life, it'll take you places you've never dreamed were possible. It's beautiful. And
yeah,
so hang in there.
Sorry. Say that one more time. Just the hang in there part. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have this very Anabaptist Mennonite voice in my head. Mennonites I'm generalizing here. Mennonites care a lot about community and specifically discerning within community, discerning beliefs, discerning scripture, discerning choices, especially within the church. And I think we use that as a safeguard to, avoid harm. Yeah, I think Mennonites use this to kind of prevent, maybe like traditionally, like prevent heresy or prevent kind of straying from the path of Jesus. Yeah, my first impulse is like, well, what about community? What about discernment?
A lot of people feel that when you start questioning your beliefs and pulling away from crowd control and herd mentality, that you're disrupting the community or breaking community, and that you're no longer accountable. But that's false. It's not necessarily true. For me, the real dynamic question for how a community functions, or any relationship for that matter, is how can I be free without violating Mariah's freedom? And how can Mariah be free without violating my freedom? How do we negotiate and navigate that sort of tumultuous river called life and relationship and community in ways that I can be my authentic self without harming you, and you can be your authentic self without harming me, but that we can in fact support one another in this spiritual endeavor to be our most authentic selves. So my wife and I, we're very free individuals, but that makes for the healthiest relationship. If we're not codependent, we're not dependent, we're interdependent, where I'm free, she's free, we choose to be in relationship together. And that means responsibility, accountability, but also an amplification of our personal freedoms, because we've found a safe place where we can be our authentic selves and test and learn how to live authentic lives and free lives, right, with each other. So I think the church, if it would relax its grip on people and let people, explore and question and search, that people would come back fuller and more alive and healthier, and the potential for a real dynamic community can happen then, rather than being a very tightly controlled group of adolescent sort of believers, you know what I'm saying, where everybody's having to behave in order to belong. And I think if the church loosened its grip and let people grow, that it would discover that it wouldn't be losing as many people, but it would, I think it would grow again.
Sure. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, would it be okay if I end our time with a blessing to you and all the baddies who are viewing and listening to this episode?
Absolutely. Better than a curse.
True. I have not offered curses yet, but maybe we can do that in the future.
Yeah.
Well, David, and all of you viewers and listeners out there, may you go from this podcast episode filled with the spirit of freedom and a taste for the adventure of deconstruction. May you wander into this, I can't decide which metaphor to use, we use so many, ocean house hike with courage and strength and authenticity. Amen.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.